Everyone repeated the same headline. Toyota returns to F1 through the back door with Haas. But if you really listen to what Komatsu and Akio Toyoda are saying, you see something very different. Toyota is not coming back as a full works team. It is turning Haas into a high-pressure corporate MBA, a place where engineers, managers, and yes, drivers are shaped to become the elite. The question is not if a Toyota-backed driver will make it to the grid. The question is, at what point does this human laboratory really start to influence who sits in the car in 2027? When Haas rebrands to TGR Haas F1 team in 2026, it looks like just another title sponsorship deal. But the timing and the context change everything. It is the first year of a brand new rule set. The driver market opens wide for 2027, and for the first time since 2009, the word Toyota is back in the official name of a Formula One team. That is exactly why Komatsu's comments on driver choice carry so much weight. He is trying to sell the new era of the team as more competitive, and at the same time, reassure the paddock that Haas has not become a Toyota B team. What is at stake here? On one side, Haas's sporting and financial survival. On the other, Toyota's project to turn F1 into the biggest talent lab it has ever had, without paying the political cost of running a full factory team. If TGR Haas nails that balance in 2026, then 2027 becomes a golden opportunity to build a tailor-made driver lineup. And that is exactly the window where Toyota drivers can move to the front of the queue. Right now, the public version of the story is pretty simple. Haas stays a Ferrari customer for engines. Toyota comes in as a technical partner, helps with the simulator, runs tests in older cars, puts its name on the team, and officially stops there. Io Komatsu repeats the same thing in every interview. We are not a Toyota Works team. There is no engine plan, no takeover. The goal, according to him and Akio Toyoda himself, is something else. Use F1 as the most extreme environment possible to develop people. Engineers who learn to make decisions in minutes, mechanics who execute under global pressure, managers who live international competition 24/7, and yes, drivers. When he is asked whether Toyota has already talked about placing its drivers at Haas, he does not dodge the question. Of course, one of their many objectives is to develop drivers. In other words, there is a clear pipeline plan that leads all the way to F1. The difference is how it will be executed, and that is where he immediately pulls the handbrake. But the main thing is performance. Anyone who gets into our race car has to be the best choice in terms of performance. Even Akio Toyoda agrees. If we put an academy driver in when he is not good enough, we become a joke. People will say, Toyota is buying a seat with money. That is not what Akio is doing. That is not what we are doing. We always choose drivers based on performance. That line defines Toyota's official limit of power. On paper, it cannot just shove an unprepared Japanese driver into the cockpit. In practice, the game is much more subtle. It is about preparing its drivers and its own structure so well that when Haas looks at the 2027 market, the Toyota name is, naturally, the best option. And that starts long before a race seat is on the table. It starts in 2025. For the first time since it entered F1, Haas is building a heavy TPC program, those private tests with older cars. 14 days at tracks like Silverstone, Paul Ricard, Imola, Mugello, and Fuji. Who is driving those cars? Exactly the names from Toyota Gazoo Racing: Ryo Hirakawa, Sho Tsuboi, Ritomo Miyata, Tsuboi Kobayashi. They are not just playing Formula One, they are learning the processes, working with Haas engineers, learning the team's language, understanding how the operation works from the inside. At the same time, Toyota helps build a new simulator in Banbury, which comes fully online in 2026. That simulator becomes the backbone of both VF26 development and the training of drivers and engineers. In practice, what Toyota is doing is filling all the spaces just below a race drive: test driver, development driver, simulator driver. It is the last step before a Sunday cockpit. And that is where a lot of people get it wrong when they talk about a disguised comeback. This is not about painting the car red and white again. It is about occupying the places where decisions are made and where performance is built. Now add to that the Haas contract situation. For 2026, the lineup is set: Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman, both signed through the end of the year. In theory, there is no room for a Toyota driver as a full-time starter, unless something very unusual happens: a collapse in performance, a contract break, a physical issue. So why is so much of the paddock already looking at TGR Haas as Toyota's doorway for 2027? The answer lies in two things: regulations and the market. 2026 is the start of a new technical cycle, big changes in power units and aerodynamics. Historically, when the rules flip, the grid gets shuffled. It happened in 2014 with the hybrids. It happened in 2022 with ground effect. The drivers know that. That is why a lot of contracts were structured to end there or shortly after. They want to see who nails the 2026 car, and only then commit to 2027 and beyond. Komatsu himself admits that logic. He says that with the new rules, most drivers want to see how 2026 plays out and then choose the best team for 2027. The result? An extremely open market, a lot of good drivers available, and teams trying to position themselves as attractive destinations. That is where the pressure on Haas comes in. If the team wants to have real choice in 2027, it needs a competitive season in 2026. Without that, it is just another midfield team, dependent on whoever is left over, or whoever brings more money. This is the exact point where Haas and Toyota's interests line up perfectly. Haas needs results to attract drivers. Toyota needs a respected team so that its talents are not seen as corporate placements, but as genuine sporting upgrades. But not everything is aligned. Picture this scenario. In 2027, Haas narrows its shortlist to two candidates to replace Ocon or Behrman. On one side, a solid veteran with a proven F1 resume and no ties to a manufacturer. On the other, a young Japanese driver from the Toyota program, who has done dozens of TPC days, knows the Banbury simulator inside out, and has Akio Toyoda's personal backing. If their numbers are similar on pure performance, the technical decision suddenly adds a third filter. Which driver fits better into the long-term TGR Haas plan? Who does more to strengthen the relationship with Toyota? The talent pipeline narrative? The idea of developing people? At that point, the Toyota driver stops being an imposed outsider and becomes the rational choice. Not because Toyota ordered it, but because the structure built in 2025 and 2026 has created that advantage. That is how you exercise power in modern F1, without ever signing a contract that says, "I decide the lineup." And there is still one more ingredient: Yuki Tsunoda. In 2025, he loses his full-time Red Bull seat and moves into a support role: test, reserve, and development driver. His deal leaves the door open for 2026 and 2027. He is Japanese, already adapted to F1, with huge appeal in the Asian market. And suddenly, on the horizon, there is a team called TGR Haas F1 team, with Toyota on the car, and a Japanese team principal. You do not need to be a conspiracy theorist to picture the perfect headline. Tsunoda leads the new Toyota era in F1 with Haas. When Komatsu is asked about that, he shuts it down. I cannot comment on his future, and he is not our driver. Then he immediately goes back to the main talking points. Full focus on 2026, then an open market in 2027. The silence, in this case, says a lot. He cannot promise anything, but he is not closing the door either. There is one detail many people underestimate: Komatsu's obsession with credibility. When he says it becomes a joke if Haas throws an unprepared Japanese driver in the car, he has two audiences in mind. First, the paddock. If Haas is seen as a Toyota paid seat, it loses standing when negotiating with other drivers, attracting engineers, or even arguing with the FIA. It turns into a satellite team with no voice. Second, Toyota itself. Akio Toyoda does not want to relive the trauma of 2002 to 2009, when Toyota burned a massive budget, had a full factory operation, and never won a race. Today, he wants a very different image: a company that learns, that develops people, that plays the political game carefully. That is why he keeps hammering people, product, pipeline. In his speeches, he barely talks about wins, podiums, or titles. He talks about the young engineers and drivers who, in 2025, started to believe more in themselves. He talks about Toyota finally moving for real, and he thanks Gene Haas and Io Komatsu by name for trusting the young people from TGR. This is the turning point. For Toyota, an engineer who spends 3 years at TGR Haas can be worth as much as a driver on the F1 grid. It is literally a live MBA, under the highest pressure in global motorsport. That is where the partnership becomes clearer. Haas brings what Toyota does not have and does not want to buy right now: a place on the grid, an F1 entry, a race operation, a history inside the championship. Toyota brings what Haas has always needed: money, technical know-how, infrastructure, a top-tier engineering reputation. In the middle of that, the race seats become the most sensitive currency. If Haas gives up too much, it loses its identity. If Toyota pushes too hard, it destroys the merit-based pipeline image it is trying to build. So where is the real red line? From what Komatsu let slip, the decision tree looks something like this. First filter, performance. If the driver is not fast enough, he is out, regardless of passport, check size, or academy logo. Second filter, image. Even if the performance is acceptable, if the choice is clearly seen as a Toyota paid seat, the team burns its reputation. That is the scenario he describes bluntly. It becomes a joke. Third filter, strategic alignment. Between two drivers with similar pace, who adds more to the long-term project? Who helps sustain the partnership? The development program? The pipeline story? It is at this third filter that Toyota names gain a quiet edge. Because in 2025 and 2026, Hirakawa, Miyata, Tsuboi, Kobayashi, and anyone else who joins the TGR Haas driver development program will not just be driving, they will be building relationships, learning processes, becoming internal products of that culture. When 2027 arrives, they will not just be Japanese drivers with manufacturer money. They will be, in Haas's own eyes, natural pieces of that ecosystem. And there is another layer, the time factor. We still do not know the exact length of this TGR title sponsorship. 3 years? A full regulation cycle? Whatever the number, it is enough time for Toyota to watch, learn, and then decide whether it is worth taking the next step. If the human lab strategy works, nothing stops TGR Haas from evolving very close to what is, in practice, a factory team in a few years. Even if it keeps running Ferrari engines, its own power unit, a bigger equity stake? Today, everyone denies it. But in F1, plans change when results show up, or when a political opportunity appears. Until that happens, the most interesting part of the game is not in the contracts. It is in the details. Who gets simulator time? Who does the TPC days? Who is in the garage on Fridays? Who gets promoted internally? Each small personnel move will be read in the paddock through the same question. Is this a Haas decision, or the invisible hand of Toyota?
In the short term, there is one thing we can say with confidence. In 2026, Ocon and Bierman are TGR Haas's sporting shield. They guarantee a minimum level of performance and experience, and above all, time for the partnership to mature. In 2027, the board changes. If Haas gets the VF26 right and shows real progress, it hits the market with a card it has never held before. A team on the rise, backed by a global giant, with a clear development pathway for both drivers and engineers. At that moment, Tsunoda, any graduate of the TGR program, or even an outside talent, will look at Haas very differently. And that is where Komatsu's quote becomes the perfect summary of everything. Toyota can suggest, support, prepare, and push its names, but to sit in the cockpit, they will have to pass the same test as anyone else. On the spreadsheet, they must be the best option on performance, and behind the scenes, the piece that fits best into this new, quiet model of power. In the end, the big reveal of this partnership is not that Toyota has secretly come back to F1. It is that it has found a way to sit at the center of the game without looking like it is in charge of anything. If you want to follow how this chess match unfolds, who gains space and who loses their seat in this new Haas-Toyota axis, that is exactly the kind of inside story we are going to break down here. So subscribe to F1 Revealed, because when the first Toyota-backed driver shows up in a TGR Haas race suit, we are not just going to say who got the drive, we are going to show why, way back, he was already being prepared for it.